All right, good evening. This work session of the School Board of Osseo Area Schools is being held in the forum room of the Educational Service Center on Tuesday, November 11, 2025. The work session is being audio recorded. The recording will be made available on the district website within 2 business days after the work session has ended. With regard to the audio recording, our communication staff has asked that we share a friendly reminder that side conversations during the work session are picked up by the recorder and can affect sound quality. Also, conversations during transitions between agenda items are on the recording as well. The intent of the school board work session is to allow for school board discussion of topics. Work sessions do not include an opportunity for audience members to address the board. To acknowledge attendance this evening, I'll ask that all present at the table state their name, starting with the person to the left.
Tanya Prince, school board member.
Kelsey Dawson, school board member.
Steve Flisk, Assistant Superintendent for the elementary and middle schools.
Anthony Parris, Executive Director of Technology.
Yvonne Schwartz-Lang, Executive Director of HR.
Yesaya Anderson, Workforce Development, Recruitment, and Retention Coordinator.
Brian Bass, Assistant Superintendent for Equity Achievement in the high schools.
John Morstead, Executive Director of Finance and Operations.
Kay Valala, Executive Director of Community Relations.
Ryan Severson Hall, Executive Director of Community Engagement.
Erica Pastor, school board member.
Amy Moore, General Counsel.
Sarah Mitchell, school board member.
Kim Heil, Superintendent.
And I, Thomas Brooks, school board member, am present. We also have a ton of educators in the room as well, so just want to say welcome and glad you're here. The purpose of the school board work sessions is to build trust and teamwork, to exchange information, and when applicable, to provide direction in order to facilitate efficient and effective decision-making at regular board meetings. Dr. Heil, will you please share your check-in?
Yes, thank you very much, Vice Chair Brooks. So welcome to everyone here. We do want to let you know that board member Mitchell needs to leave a little earlier this evening, so we are moving the agenda up a little bit. So this discussion will be around staff retention, followed by discussion on open enrollment, CACR results, and then long-range financial planning. So we'll go ahead and get started with our first presentation. And I'll introduce Yvonne Schwartz-Lang, Executive Director of HR, and you can introduce who will be presenting with you, please. Thank you, Dr. Heil. Good evening, Chair Prince, members of the school board, Superintendent Dr. Heil, cabinet, and educators in the audience. My name is Yvonne Schwartz-Lang. I lead the HR function at the district. We were asked to provide an overview of exit interviews tonight. And with me here tonight is Yesaya Anderson, coordinator in charge of workforce retention, workforce development, recruitment, and retention. It's a mouthful. I also have a couple of members of our team also here present with us today. So I want to thank them as well. So I'm going to start with presentation outcomes. Thank you. So we were asked by the board to speak about exit interviews, and the request included wanted to know who has access to the information, what type of data we use in collecting in our exit interview process, what do we do with the information from a retention standpoint, and an analysis of the data. So with those questions in mind, we put together this shorter presentation for you tonight. The presentation outcomes are, you'll learn about the purpose of interviews, exit interviews, how retention data is collected, analyzed, and used, and how we use data to inform or shape our retention strategies. And before, so I have a couple of slides, but before I hand it off to Yesaya, I want to first just reground us and reset us in the district strategic priorities. So we have the strategic priorities up here for this fiscal year. There's been some revamping of those strategies. We've synthesized, done the work to synthesize those strategies. Exit interviews fall under priority B2, which is ensuring consistent system-wide implementation of evidence-based staff retention strategies. I do want to remind everyone that while exit interviews can help us identify trends and issues requiring attention, it is one tool in our retention toolkit. So when Yesaya presents, you're going to hear information not only about our exit interview process, but also she's going to highlight some other metrics that we use in regard to our retention strategies. Some of those, and I'm going to just highlight briefly, and Ilsea will do a bit deeper dive. Some of the other strategies that we utilize are mentorship programs, professional development, compensation benchmarking. In addition, we are exploring new strategies such as state interview toolkits for supervisors. So Ilsea will walk you through the exit interview process and the data we collect. In addition, again, she'll highlight some other metrics. At the end of our presentation, we'll pause and process, so you'll have some time to just reflect on the information today and ask some questions. Before I hand it over to Ilsea, I did want to just highlight the purpose of interviews. Why do exit interviews matter? They help provide valuable insights into departures. They help us to identify patterns and challenges that can impact retention and engagement. They can help us address concerns, which ultimately we're going to use the data to improve the employee experience and workplace culture. We also want to use exit interview, we use the data to help us grow. We use the data to strengthen the experiences through feedback and to help inform or shape our strategies to help recruitment, development, and the support systems for current and future staff. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ilsea, who is going to start with our current data collection process.
Thank you, Yvonne. Good evening, Superintendent Dr. Heil, Chair Prince, Vice Chair Brooks, and members of the board, as well as our teachers here. So this, as Yvonne mentioned, this is one of our current data collection points. We are going to talk about the exit survey as well as the exit interview. I put in some of the some one-pagers so then you can see the differences and the purposes and how we're in alignment to differentiate both of them. So yes, this is the exit. So we start with the resignation form. We have this form is anyone who resigns or retires when someone's ready to leave the district. We ask them to complete this form. It's completed in Droplet. Once the form is submitted, it will generate a link for an exit survey. The exit survey is voluntary, is confidential, is hosted by Qualtrics. It's also one of the tools that we are using now for the stakeholder surveys. Because it's automatic, it goes to whatever email the staff who is leaving chose to put it there, the preferred information. This automated actually has been a big step forward to us. Before, everything was very manual. I think we implemented 2 to 3 years ago. It ensures that everyone who leaves get the same opportunity. They get the link right away so their voices is heard. And then as an HR, we don't need to be sending links or tracking manually one by one. Within the survey, the last question offers them the option for an exit interview. So then that exit interview, they will provide their names, and as in HR or in my team, recruitment and retention, we can have something more conversational. It allows us to go a little bit deeper, and that is not it's more qualitative versus quantitative data that will provide that. As was asked, who owns this data right now? HR owns that. We partner with a business analyst. She's terrific. She's from the LTL, and she manages our contract data in there. Next to it, we have the exit survey review cycle. I want to mention that beyond collecting the data, we want to make sure that our process remains relevant and very healthy to the district. So we have a notice period. Our goal is to have those surveys and interviews conducted within their notice period, so then the feedback is fresh, is most actionable. Obviously, there are times that we have to conduct that after the employee has left the district. We also have audits through the year. We monitor those rates and the data quality, so that is allowing us to catch any gaps early on the process. And then continuous improvement, we continue to adjust the timing as needed. Those insights, allow us to refine language as well as how we're following up. This is an evolving process. We will continue to improve as we go. So this one here is a quick snapshot. There are two separate things. This graphic actually is from a report from EFP. It shows us everyone who has left since July 1st to present. I want to make sure that I mention that's only July 1st to present because, this is our most data cycle. We have refined the exit survey this year. We shortened it. It was very lengthy. This one is just to focus more on the improvement. Like we want to make sure the completion rates are higher, as well as the quality of feedback. And if anyone who wants to provide additional feedback, they have the option to talk with us via exit interview. So out of everyone who left from July to present, it was around 90 employees, 90. Out of those, you can see here the purple and the light blue retirement and resignation are actually the ones who have, and I apologize, I just updated this slide, so it might be slightly off from your PowerPoint. I just want to make sure I have the most accurate. So this is from a couple weeks ago. The ones that you have in person, but this one is the most updated. Out of those 80 employees who left, 24 decided to complete the exit survey. It's about 30% of them. It is a normal number. Normally exit surveys or any surveys is anything between 30 to 50. Obviously it's still early in the year and we will focus for more completion rate. And it is also through Qualtrics. And out of all of them, only 4 have reached out to us to talk with us in person. Based on those, we have our early findings, why people are leaving. So out of the 24 who decided to complete the exit survey, we have career advancement as 25%, the reason why they're leaving. The other one says other is also 25%. Other, I can mention a little bit the reasons why they said other. Then we have compensation, personal, relocation, retirement. Some of those reasons we can control as a district, some we can't. So I just want to touch base on the ones that we can control, such as career advancement. So that's the most common reason why they're leaving, for growth. So we want to make sure our leaders are prepared to discuss some career pathways, clear career pathways. The ones who said others, one left a position in OSU to join as a nutrition assistant within OSU. So they completed that, but they just moved positions around. And the other one said that he was just looking to work closer with his students. And we don't know exactly what position they were at because it is anonymous. I want to mention obvious compensation is here. That's one of the ones that we can control. It's the lowest rate percentage. However, I want to make sure that we utilize, just knowing that we utilize benchmarking and compensation studies to remain very competitive within our market peers. However, we do see, opportunity for some recognition projects within those to increase those rates or decrease those rates. And then we have early attrition. Everyone will complete that. So then we have 21% and 53%. So all of them, the majority left within the first 3 years of being here within our district. So it shows us that we're doing a good job attracting our talent, but we do have a huge opportunity to strengthen how we're keeping them, especially on the first 3 years. They are very critical. We need connection, we need growth, and we also need to support them on those will show the biggest difference. I will mention how we are using those learnings to shape our retention strategy. Before that, I want to show our demographics. That's another tool, another reporting, not through Qualtrics. I'm using this one because this one has more of a number. July to now, I couldn't pull much of a demographic. So this one, I just compared 2 years right now, the reasons why they left, in the demographics and ethnicity of the people who left us. We know that the resignation and retirements continue to be the primary drivers. ESP positions are the number one turnover rate positions. And if you don't know, I was going to point, it shows dismissed position ending. I wanted to clarify, dismissed is anyone within their career that were terminated for cause. Open-ended is expected. All the ones who position ended, they are continuous building stuff. And the RIF, the staff reduction of performance, are the ones that who left within the first 3 years of probation. We have what we're learning. I'm calling emerging themes simply because we don't have yet enough data to call a trend, but we see where we're going. Career mobility, how we can better show career pathways early on. Process improvements or continuous improvements, this is how we're going to improve if we allow them to have a voice, and continue consistent digital and innovation with our district. And the last one is a positive culture. We want to make sure we continue to use in-hold space model to create a space where they can feel seen, valued, and supported. We are cascading this concept throughout our district. I know many leaders already exercising them on our sites. We did have a great exercise today as a team in HR, and it was fun. It was great to see everyone else who doesn't have the opportunity to attend the learning leaders to exercise and find value on the holding space. All right, just a few more. I'm almost done.
You're good. You're good.
Where we are and what is next. Before I'm going to just say, what were you doing with this information? The insights of this interview is actually helping us moving from reactive to proactive. We have a few initiatives right there that we have in place. Create clear pathways. I want to make sure that we are leveraging the programs that we have in action right now as a district. We have a few. Grow Your Own is one of them. We have 2 different pathways. We target ESPs and teachers, general education or special education. Everyone is actually welcome to apply, but we do target those 2 positions, and we welcome them to develop as they want to become educators. We also have New Teacher Workshop Week, New Teacher Mentorship Program, and Teacher of Color Program. All of those are part of the Teacher Mentorship and Retention Grants that I currently manage on my department. We also have digital survey. We have showing as completed. However, this is continue to improve. We have digitized the survey, but we are also planning to digitize the exit interview for better tracking. And then we develop and coaching our leaders. We plan to integrate integrate career conversations into existing structures throughout check-ins, one-on-ones, as well as us in human resources sharing data with our leaders and managers as well as training. And the last one that I have there is mentorship and holding space. It is in progress. Our focus is to strengthen our model of holding space. We want to make sure that we are creating intentional moments where our staff are feeling that we feel seen and heard, especially during the times of changes or growth that we go through. Alongside with that, I want to say that the district has allocated a budget, and we're developing an ESP mentorship program. It's not through grant, it's with the district budget. We are now identifying our mentors, and we will be launching as soon as possible. And the early focus on, connection, the attrition data. I know that if we do continue to increase those mentorship programs, our staff will feel the sense of belonging, and then we're going to see retention across the district. My last slide shows the next steps or learning work. I want to make sure that those bullet points right here, we are using data to target our retention initiatives. We are in alignment with our district strategic priorities. We are studying best practice, as Yvonne says. We want to make sure we have stay interviews so we can complement our exit data. We are sharing our workforce insights with our leaders and managers, and of course increasing enrollment for Grow Your Own. So Grow Your Own, that is a lot to share. I can do a whole presentation on those. It's technically my baby since I started here in the district. I want to share that we've been fairly successful if we compare with our first year. Out of the top of my head, the first year we might have a handful of participants, only 2 moved to the second year. We're in our 3rd year, and we have over 18 on a cohort and more with interest. It's just any application review. Most of them are ESP staff, and we also have a few teachers. So for focusing on all of those bullet points, but also in early retention focus. Make sure that we focus on the first 3 years. They're critical, and we see that they're not fully embedded in our culture. How we can make onboarding, mentorship, and connection be stronger early on, and sharing this with our leaders so they can take action and, at the team level. I think that's it. I will pass now to Yvonne, who is going to take the next slide.
So we wanted to make sure that we had some time to pause and process the information. Obviously, this is data and information, high-level overview of the process. But the two reflective questions that we have for you are what stands out to you about the patterns and stories emerging from our exit data, and how do these insights deepen our understanding of staff experience and retention across the district? Of course, we are here to answer any questions that you have about information presented today, or further questions, perhaps things that you may have wanted to see and are looking for more information on.
Thank you both. Board members, any questions?
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. Thank you for the presentation. I was just curious if you can share any data with us tonight, like examples of those that complete the form that have resigned, any of the, like an example of, maybe patterns or concerns you're seeing, how that's addressed, or if that's something you want to send us if you don't have that tonight. And also I thought it was helpful, I was thinking more in terms of those that resigned, but the information, the data collected on those that retire, because I feel like that's really helpful also in a positive direction of if you can share maybe some of the positive things that were shared that we want to continue forward to maintain the best environment for the teachers.
Sure. So the first question was, we did have a slide which Nilsea can go back to in one of our processes where it was broken down by the reasons for departures. So, career growth versus resignation versus family reasons. Again, we use multiple different applications to gather information. And so in our Qualtrics form, which is online, and in our Droplet form, people do have the opportunity to, there's a box that opens up so people can share additional details in those boxes. In addition, they have the opportunity to have in-person meetings as well. So we don't have any, most of the data that Nilsea shared today, that we're halfway through the cycle. So we do have some trends, but we want to make sure that we have the full data of this cycle to be able to identify further, what the trends are looking like, and then compare that to last year in terms of the deeper dive. And then, I'm sorry, the second question?
Just looking at the data from those that retired, just even how it's analyzed, like some of the positive things about maintaining a healthy culture. Just curious about if you're able to share any of those patterns or specifics, or if that's something you could share with us going forward.
I apologize. I do have more details to share later on. I have in Qualtrics, they do share. We ask more into depth the reasons why they're leaving, why they're staying. One of the questions we also share is if they would return to our district. So everyone who's completed the survey as of right now, 65% said they would, 30% said unsure, only one said no. Interesting. So we do have other, main points that we are asking into depth that we can share.
I wonder, Director Mitchell, maybe embedded in your question, and it would be mine, would be, do people have the option, you kind of answered it, but do they have the option to share if they're leaving because the work environment was not a positive environment for them? These seem like very HR classifications, which makes sense, but I think what we're really trying to understand is what concerns do people have? Are they leaving because we are not providing the best place to work, which is what our goal is under Superintendent Heil. So I think we really want to be continuing to get a context and understanding of the culture around that goal of best place to work. So maybe with the additional data, and it's very helpful to know that only kind of one person said that they would not return, so that's helpful.
Well, I was
think-
kind of along those lines wondering, just kind of like defining, like when you say, when, like resignation, I think that's kind of a broad term, so is it like, and then when you look at the early findings, why, 25% said, say, other, so, to kind of that.
You're okay. She's so nervous. You're okay.
You're doing great, yeah.
I should stop if you're taking too much of your
No,
time.
no, you're good.
So we do give the audience, we do give them the option to say why. Some choose to not, even though it's confidential, and we don't know necessarily what person, if they're retiring and they say, other than they're retiring, if they're leaving and they say other, it's still confidential, but not many answer the reason why on a blank space. They do have always the option. I know that a lot of them, they do talk to their supervisor, but we always offer them to talk with someone they trust so they feel comfortable or neutral with an HR. Most likely will be my team, but we do offer, if they feel comfortable, if they prefer somebody else, they can certainly have an in-person interview. We can say in person, over the phone, over Teams. We try to give them options as well.
What we can do, board members, is we can get that data and we can just share it with you. We'll meet tomorrow. We'll just share it with you via an email.
Right, and the thing that I would piggyback on is, again, some of the additional context, right? If there was, for instance, a work environment issue, sometimes that is in that dialogue box that opens up. Other times, it's more common that those are in-person meetings, and that feedback is informally, captured in person as opposed to in the exit interview data. Most of the time, if there's a work environment issue, people really want to speak in person.
Is there a way to gather that, is there a way to gather that more informally then? Almost like a separate bucket where you gather like culture? Because if we're saying we're not able to really capture it in some of these surveys because it is just checking boxes. Is there a way to make sure we're not letting any of that information slip through the cracks, and that because that's really valuable data? Yeah, and I don't quite know how you would do that, but that would be really interesting to see.
Oops.
Go ahead.
We do have that option. Sorry to interrupt. We do have the option that we talk if it is management, if it is culture, if it is operational, and they do. The exit survey provides a wide range of them, why, if they're happy or not. We just made it very,
Sorry, I know you have all the back end data, and we're like, we want to see it all.
We want to see them all.
It might be helpful to your question, Director Foster. Sometimes when we present the data, we show you all the items on the survey, so I think that might be helpful to include that in our update.
Yeah.
So you can see
Correct.
all the questions that are asked,
Yeah.
and that might be helpful.
But I just also wanted to say thank you for doing this. This is a huge movement for us as a district, and this was something when I joined DPAC was one of the conversations and recommendations. So it's super cool to see it in action, and I know it's hard information to gather because people are on their way out, and it's sometimes a fast exit might be that's the last thing they want to do is do paperwork, but this is so valuable for us as a district to keep improving and make sure their voices are heard even after they're not here. So thank you for doing it.
Well, and especially if, there's action tied to it. I know I work in an organization too, and so like when you're asked to do this and you see people leaving and if you can see the feedback, like impacting or changing like something, then that makes a difference too. I know, so to like add another, I'm just more curious because I just feel like sometimes, I kind of said this when we were talking about when, I don't know, a couple work sessions ago about just doing exit interviews for seniors, and I was like, why don't we do it with juniors? Because by the time you're a senior, you're kind of already like out the door, you're like whatever. And kind of the same thing of just like, and I know Dr. Howell, you just kind of answered it with, before I was going to ask this, but I know there's some staff surveys, but just even like stay surveys of just even like that pulse of like, where's everyone at, and if there is, even if there maybe is like a bubbling up something to, before people do get to the point where they want to like leave for whatever reason that is, to just, have that stay survey.
Do we currently have stay surveys
So
or like
we're-
end of year?
So we don't currently, that's what, part of what we were calling our learning work. We are researching the best way to create state interviews, and it would be more of a toolkit for supervisors. Could be, site admin or the supervisor, really the people that are gonna be closest to the employee. We do, on occasion, do climate studies as well. That's something that sometimes HR does it, sometimes we do it in partnership with, EMO or another union as well. It just depends on the circumstances. And it can be, a number of reasons, but just to go in and just take a pulse, kind of a pulse check.
Yeah.
So we've utilized that as well.
Great.
And then I did have one more question. The early findings and just even some of these other charts, it would be helpful if, and I don't know if it already is, if we could break it out, ESPs, teachers, and like other categories of staff. And I know you're just,
We
this is
do
just
have
starting,
that,
but
yeah, so we can certainly provide.
that would be
them.
really
Yeah.
helpful
Yeah.
to be able to see as a board member.
Yeah.
I just, go ahead.
Okay.
So I had just a couple questions. One is just more of a process question, thinking about our retirees. What's our plan to get the survey out to them before retirement? So just, I saw that the number was relatively small for retirees, and I wasn't sure if you were already thinking through strategies to increase that number and sort of get that wisdom before they leave, and if you can maybe share kind of what that plan is at this point.
Yeah.
Well, we don't, as of right now, they normally have, I think Laura mentioned to me, who is our benefits person like a month. We try to send all the forms to be completed before they leave within a timeline. And I appreciated you saying that because we would love to hear from the ones who have the full cycle here with us. I think I will, because I said this is early data we didn't have before. Hopefully by the end of the year we can see if there is an increase. Otherwise, we should definitely see if we can have those surveys early on before a few months ahead.
Yeah. Thank you. And the other one I think is maybe less of a question and is more of a comment. The number of Black or African American staff that completed the survey seems high. And I would be interested in what we learned from those employees, particularly given that this board has made it a priority to invest and prioritize recruiting, teachers of color and ultimately increasing the diversity of our staff across the district. So I just want to make sure that we're actually leveraging this data to improve their experience, to help with those retention efforts. And so I don't necessarily need that information today. I know you said this is early data, but I'm hoping at some point we can get an update on how that's all connected.
Yeah, we have been doing a deeper dive into the demographics by category, work category, position, and also demographic data based on identity as well. We would definitely like to have data from the full year to look at that, but we're looking for trends, anything that would look like disproportionate departures as well, because that will help us, to, and then that analytical data, right, that goes with it to help us inform and understand what are the trends in terms of those departures, and do we need to make some more adjustments?
We will get the data out from this information for you.
Thank you.
And really quick, did you say that Qualtrics is also our stakeholder survey for staff? So it's completely anonymous, so we will never, because I do see the participation has 30 to 50%. It may be considered good, but we'd love to keep getting those numbers higher and higher participation. So sometimes I hear that folks don't feel comfortable or that it's gonna identify them. So with Qualtrics, we are 100% sure that it is never identifying the person who fills it out.
Correct.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. We'll move on next to, we're moving up, our open enrollment inter-district transfer. So John, if you can key us off on that, please. And that'll be joined by, if needed, General Counsel Moore. So. She needs to put us in order, children.
All right, thank you, Dr. Heil.
Mm-hmm.
So what we wanted to bring forward to the board is really a discussion just on or not just open enrollment, but enrollment options that the district has. Because we're going to be ultimately asking for a little bit of action that the board take to kind of help with transparency and also steps that we'll be taking going forward as we're kind of incorporating this with the boundary change process together to take an overall comprehensive look at our total enrollment and how that works and how we want to manage it going forward. So one of the things that we really want to start with is grounding everyone on these 3 different terms because they're used interchangeably and they mean different things. So to start, the one that's not on here that I don't mention is a resident student. You live in the district, you attend the district. That one's a pretty obvious one. An open enrolled student is a student who lives outside of Osseo area schools. So you live in a different public school district, but you have applied to our district and been accepted to attend our schools. Open enrollment, once accepted, gives you the right to continue your education through the end of your high school career with us, unless you choose to go somewhere else. So you're the only one that can take it away. We can't take it away from you with one exception, and that is truancy. So if you don't come to school, we can pull your open enrollment. The second one is in-district transfer. So these are students who live within our boundary and are assigned to a specific boundary site, but have applied and attend a different site than their neighborhood school. An example of this is you live in Edinbrook, but you decided to attend Woodland for some reason. And so you made that decision, you requested it from the district, and we granted it for you. And so you have that right. And the last one is the magnet transfer. So this is a combination of both of these kind of together. You're either a out-of-district student or a resident who has applied for magnet programming through Northwest Suburban Integrated School District, which is what the NWSISD, trip over that one, stands for. And so then you're part of one of our magnet programs. But what the biggest difference with magnet transfer compared to the others is in the 2 other cases, the district is not obligated to transport you. With magnet, if you're a magnet student, we do transport you to your magnet school. So once we kind of set the stage there, we wanted to take a quick look at our current state of enrollment and where we're at. And how I would address our current enrollment, especially from the open enrollment standpoint, is we have kind of an informal process today. So our open enrollment today is available for all schools with the exception of, and I put acronyms up here, but I'll tell you what they are, Maple Grove Senior High, Maple Grove Middle School, and Fernbrook Elementary. Those 3 are restricted, or what we're currently calling a hard close, because we are either at capacity or at staff capacity, and pretty much the buildings are full. We don't have the ability to go add additional students. Both Fernbrook and Maple Grove Senior High are actually over capacity today. Maple Grove Middle School is within 20 kids of their capacity today. In-district transfer currently is in a moratorium per school board policy. So once we took action and asked the board to take action on the boundary changes, that enacted a moratorium on in-district transfers through the first full year of those boundary changes. That'll take us through the next school year, so this year and the next year. So that kind of sets the stage for where we're at. Really what we want to talk about today focuses on open enrollment, but we would like to continue the conversation as we get a little bit closer. So what I'm going to focus on first is open enrollment, and then we'll kind of talk about next steps and where it goes from there. And Amy's going to help me here a little bit. So the statute, there's state statutes that require that school districts offer open enrollment. It's protected, but there are some limitations. And I don't know, Amy, do you want to kind of explain what the limitations are?
There's lots of words up there. If a district really wants to close by grade level, is usually what it's done at. Enrollment for people coming from outside the district, you will do it by resolution, and you can do it by either 1% of the total enrollment at each grade level or the number of districts at that grade level enrolled in a non-resident district, right? Usually what people do is they do the 1%, they'll have that in there. And then also by board action is you would put kind of like any requirements, like a lot of times you'll see staff preference, could come before other people who aren't staff if you're applying for open enrollment. And so it provides the parameters of when we are allowed to say we won't accept an open enrolled student. We still get to determine what our building capacities are. So, right, this is for across the district, the 1% at each grade level. And then we would make a determination of what buildings are at capacity, like John identified.
And John, just a reminder that the in-district moratorium is for elementary and middle school levels, because that's who we did boundary changes for. We did not do boundary changes for the high school level, so in-district transfers can still take place at the high school level, but not at the elementary and middle school.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things, since in the past we've kind of done this in our own internal process, that we felt in the best interest of transparency that we asked the school board to take action on at your next regular business meeting would be to close, limit, however you want to term it, open enrollment at the following buildings we have listed here: Maple Grove Senior High, Maple Grove Middle School, Fernbrook Elementary. We also listed Aspen Ridge on here. The reason Aspen Ridge is on there is today that is Fernbrook. Fernbrook and Aspen Ridge are the same geographic area. And so right now, just in order for us, and they're also the areas where we have the most tremendous growth going, to get into the first year, especially the first year of a brand new school that we haven't done in more than 20 years, we're asking to kind of hold that, and so we can control it a little bit, make sure we have our systems in place, make sure we're capturing all our residents there, and then we would like to revisit that. So it's really to get us from today until next October, where we would then ask to be able to revisit that process. And really the intention is to then go forward on an annual basis. And if the board needs to take action, we would make a recommendation. And if you don't, we'll recommend that we open back up. We want to be as available at all buildings to our both our residents and any other resident that may want to come in, as long as we can manage it. And one of the concerns with that is if, as I mentioned early on, if you're a kindergartner, and I'll just use Aspen Ridge as an example. I'm a kindergartner, I live in Corcoran, and I want my child to go to Aspen Ridge. We say yes today. Your child was just given a 13-year pass to Osseo area schools. So you're in now, and you're going to go to Aspen Ridge, and Aspen Ridge then takes you to Osseo Middle School. So that's the feeder school. So that's where you go to middle school, and then you would go to Maple Grove Senior. Well, if we let 100 kids into Aspen Ridge, eventually I have 100 more kids that we have to figure out how to fit into Maple Grove Senior. And what if the other schools that feed Maple Grove Senior, as an example, Basswood has 50 kids, and Rush Creek has 50 kids, and Oakview has 20 kids, and Cedar, all of a sudden we have this glut of kids, and we can really overwhelm one of our buildings somewhere in the system. So it's trying to be more intentional about managing that carefully, so we can both offer open enrollment and in-district transfer thoughtfully, so that we stay within our capacities. And the goal of staying within the capacities really comes back to taxpayers and saying, well, we thank you for blessing us with these building projects and the ability to make these buildings larger and to make these great improvements. We don't want to have to ask you to do it again. And if we get a little carried away, that might be exactly what would happen if suddenly we need Maple Grove Senior to have another addition. Well, I don't feel like that's us being as transparent and representative as we should be about it, so it's trying to manage that process. We always want to, I could use the example of, when an airplane, you buy your ticket to go on spring break, your airline wants to fill that airplane full because they make the most amount of money, they get the most revenue, they get their best bang for their buck on a full airplane. We want our buildings to be near capacity to do that too, but to still be able to manage them appropriately so our teachers can comfortably do their job and they don't have 40 kids in a class. We're staying within targets, we're doing those things so that we can, again, be intentional and be transparent about the process, so everyone knows if I want to apply for open enrollment in Osseo area schools, this is what that process is. And if we choose to limit it, here's why. And so then you as board members can feel confident when you're answering those questions in the grocery store, well, here's why we chose to limit it. So the other portion is in-district transfer, and I just want to paint a quick picture. So this is our current in-district transfer amounts. Ends up being just under 3,200 students at each site. The current, we did offer with current boundary change the option, so if we had taken any type of action on your enrollment prior to the boundary change process, you already had in-district enrollment, you already were an open enrollment student, you retain those rights. So you're still going exactly where you were intended to go, what your path was when you were told before by the enrollment center. And then we're also allowing the caveat of 5th graders and 8th graders this year can choose if they would like to, the 5th and 8th? No,
4th and 7th.
4th and 7th this year, thank you. If they would like to stay next year in their current school, just to continue that leg before they move to the next level. So those pieces are already embedded in the process. What we're going with next steps is we'd like to be able to come back to the school board and Dr. Heil and her team we need to have some conversations and do a little bit of research on what the proper parameters are for open enrollment in the future. And we expect to be looking at that on an annual basis, if not sooner, depending on the need. And same thing with in-district transfer. How do we set those parameters so in-district transfer options are available and the parameters for both in-district transfer and for open enrollment are equitable, so our students who want to attend different buildings can, and our taxpayers who are paying for all of it have the rights to be able to have some choice there, not just, today the system's set up that open enrollment actually has a little bit of an advantage. And so how can we try to make that as equitable as possible? We still have to stay within the bounds of the law, so we can never truly close open enrollment, but we can limit it, and the 1%, we pretty much cover that in every grade anyway, so it's not like, if we went to that, you're pretty much restricting open enrollment in those grades. But the heart of it is to provide equitable options and be transparent about how we're doing it, so people understand when you're asking that we have answers for you and you can feel comfortable about it.
And also to note that it's not just a once a year thing. So the board, you can say this, you can come back in 2 months if numbers change and switch it, correct?
Yeah, if there's pressure, it's something that we can return. And there's an enrollment committee that's always looking at primarily in-district transfer, but we're also looking at open enrollment on really every couple month basis. It's a little more intense over the summer, and then it spaces out to go with each trimester once we get into the school year. But we're constantly looking at that and having conversations on, do we need to change? Do we need to make an adjustment? A lot of times during the year, it's based on what we staffed the building at. So we want to be, again, supportive of our teachers and not just keep adding people even though the staff level's set. So we try to hold to the staffing level at that point.
I think the other piece for the board is the enrollment policy will be coming up in the 500 series, so you'll see that probably more towards June is what we talked about.
So again, the goal of today was just to kind of give you a heads up that we're going to be submitting to you a request to formally take action on the school board, and I believe it'll be within consent, to close those 4 buildings for essentially the next year until next October. And we'll put that in the resolution if we have to put dates on it, but essentially we'll take an annual view of it and then make the decision. If at that time we can say, hey, if we were going to open up some schools, we will do that. If they need to continue, so on. But then it also gives us that ability to come back to you, have a conversation, get your input on what you feel we should be doing for parameters, and so we can then build that within the policy and the procedure around enrollment, so we have that information going forward for next year. So I'm all yours for questions.
All right, let's go first.
Can I ask a question? The thought behind the reviewing it in October, is that just to have it set for the January close of enrollment? Or what is the thought behind that?
I think the intention is to we start accepting applications. Is it, Brian, is it the 15th of October?
Yep, and then they have through January 15th.
Yeah, that's the deadline. So you need to kind of inform people to say, okay, this is the cycle we're working on. So that's traditionally why within an October board meeting is when that would happen.
Will that be enough time?
Yeah, typically.
Yeah, okay.
It's pretty traditional. One of our neighboring school districts, they close open enrollment every year at their October meeting is when they do it. So.
Thank you.
Are you it's hard to sometimes make good decisions because, you know, I know later on we're gonna have a fuller conversation about enrollment and, but are you anticipating, we're gonna get an influx of outside enrollment requests for these particular schools?
Yes. We already are receiving applications, and I'll go to the Aspen Ridge was the first application we had when the applications opened. So we've already received some there, and know that, you know, especially the schools that always see more open enrollment are the schools that are on the boundary. And so we're in the process of building a brand new state-of-the-art school about 3 blocks from the boundary, in an area that also happens to be fairly distant for what's just across the boundary for us in that area. A lot of it actually goes to Buffalo, Hanover, Montrose, so they have a long drive if you live in that area. And so I made that decision for my family. We actually live in the Elk River district, but in the city of Albertville. And so I could drive a long ways to Rogers to take my kids to school, or I could go right across the way to the school I can almost see that's less than a mile from me. It was just proximity. So that happens a lot, and you plan for that. And we know the development up there is intense. I know just in, I believe it's Fernbrook's current area, there's 1,000 new homes that are just outside their border. And Fernbrook will become the closest elementary to that area, even though it's Anoka Hennepin to the north of them. It's just typically how it will happen. So we know those requests are going to come. The question is managing it so that it can flow through the system properly, and especially, you know, our tightest point today might be Maple Grove Senior, but we kind of see the top of the mountain is coming, and we see it, I can see a 10-year forecast, and so we see it trending back down after a while. And you want to be able to go, okay, well, if we can manage and keep that near its capacity, but again, control it so we don't overwhelm the system, and opportunities, or as many opportunities are there as possible. It's middle schools really that are going to be our choke point. With the boundary changes, we're actually creating capacity at Osseo Middle, but all the growth is in Osseo Middle. So that's where most of the growth to the northwest you see will go that way. Maple Grove Middle's pretty high anyways because they have a pretty large area and a little bit of growth. You know, so managing those pieces, and you can manage them different ways. You can always come back and change the boundary again. No, thank you, but talk to us in 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. No, we won't be here.
But you know,
we will.
It's just tools in your tool chest, and I think if we can be thoughtful about the enrollment, we can manage it well to keep those buildings running as optimally as we can, and still, I mean, open enrollment brings additional revenue into the district, and we'd like to have that, but I've been in a district previously that went a little hog wild, and that they had 40% open enrollment. And yes, it brings in a ton of stuff, but you're doing that a bit on the back of your own taxpayers because they're footing a bigger piece of the bill. You know, so it's you have to be really careful about that and be very transparent with what you're doing and what they know you're doing. So I think that's why if we can set it up so we can give the board some good choices, you can feel good about the decisions that you're making.
Should we go one by one? So the same problem that we had for years is Maple Grove Senior High and Maple Grove Middle School. Would the board be comfortable with continuing to have that closed? Because that's our bursting spot right there.
Yeah, even with the addition, we anticipate Maple Grove Senior will hit 3,000 students. It's kind of max capacity even with the addition, and that stuff will go to about 2,950, but we know we'll probably go over that in about 5 years.
And that was our goal in meeting last week for 4 hours to start looking at as we have open enrollment, because legally they have to come in, and once they earn, they follow everyone else. Do we need to put an amount on that? Because that's the reason why I was somewhere at Maple Grove Senior with so many and going to Maple Grove Middle, because we weren't counting all those kids that were coming into open enrollment and hitting Maple Grove Senior. So.
I have a clarifying question, just to be crystal clear. So if we do not close Fernbrook and Aspen, that would mean that while our in-district freeze is in place, other cities would have the opportunity to come in to these schools and not our own residents.
Yes.
Correct.
It's one of the reasons why we thought it was probably prudent to add those two, because they're having the largest change. So Fernbrook's going to lose 400 plus kids, and Aspen Ridge is going to gain these 400 plus kids. They suddenly both have capacity they've never had. You know, one didn't exist and the other one suddenly has all this room. So just the first year where change is crazy, it also made sense to say, how do you level the playing field as much as you can? And if we can bring in a whole bunch of people on open enrollment only, but you live in our district, you just got punished because you don't get to go to the new school where somebody who lives just outside can't. So it just made sense, and especially with, it's new, we haven't done it in a while, there's a different learning model. A year's not a big ask, I don't think, in that, to say, let's just take our time so we can also then, in that meantime, study and make sure we're thoughtful like we've done with so many other things with Crestview going for its rebuild, to make sure we're intentional and we have a long runway so we can do it right when we get there. I think that's really the goal.
It really just allow also to those collective staff, new staff, and Fernbrook staff and the admin to really catch their breath a bit. Makes a lot of sense.
How many open enrolled students did we plan for?
For which one?
For Aspen Ridge.
Right now, we haven't included that at all. We're just focused on the current students who would move based on the boundary change and the projected growth.
And then same with in-district transfers, there's no forecasts?
Well, there's all the in-district transfers in that area transfer out to somewhere else because that school didn't exist. So what we're going on the assumption that they're going to continue to the school they want to, but we are building staffing capacity just in case they don't. Because that can happen. There's a handful of them that go to Basswood as an example. Well, suddenly there's a school that's a whole lot closer to you. You may choose to switch, but if next year's 5th grade for you and all your friends are at Basswood, you may want to stay there. Part of the trick in that area is Aspen Ridge and Fernbrook go to one middle school, where say Rush Creek and Basswood, they go to a different middle school. So you're going to have people there where they may want, I'm assuming you're going to want to go where you're going to follow your friends to middle school. So you may want to stay there. So that's where you could get Basswood in-district transfers who live in the Aspen Ridge area who do switch to Aspen Ridge because it gives them a year sooner with their peers that they would go to middle school with. And so those are all decisions families need to make to say what's right for you. And we're trying to leave it as flexible as we can.
And say we limited the number of open enrolled students versus completely closing open enrollment. What are in terms of process, what are the issues that you are foreseeing?
Thomas, can I say for the 2 elementary schools we're
Yeah.
speaking of? It's 2
Yeah.
elementary schools.
Oh, just for those two?
Yeah.
I thought we decided on the other
Yeah,
two.
I didn't know. I didn't want to be bossy.
Yeah.
I just went, okay.
So just to clarify, you're saying if you set a number, and say
Yeah.
X number of kids can go to Fernbrook and Aspen Ridge on open enrollment for this start of this next school year, right? Because we want to address it every year to see. Probably the biggest thing is, could we limit it? Yes. Could we do that? That is a possibility, but it is a possibility, again, that you're not allowing to your current in-district transfers for this 1 year. And it's one of the reasons why we thought perhaps just sitting on it for a year was a good idea, because then the next year we can say, okay, here's what we're going to allow, this many open enrolled and this many in-district transfers, and we're going to manage it that way.
So I get that
So
part,
just
but in
keep
terms
it
of process of enrolling those students and integrating them into the school environment, what are the issues that you're foreseeing that would come up that would make things harder, either on teachers, on admin, on the enrollment center? Like, what are the issues that?
The enrollment process isn't hard. It's typically where you see an issue is it's hard to predict how many applications you're going to get. If you just open the door and you suddenly get 150, that's a staffing concern. Is my first question, is a staffing concern. The other side is we're not transporting those kids, which means their vehicles are coming to the site. So we don't have to manage, admin has to manage, how do we flow those kids in and flow those kids out?
So my original question was if we limited it, so say 20 students, we know what that number is coming in, we know that that's 20 students.
Yep.
What I'm hearing is that there are no particular issues with enrollment. So we're making this decision based off of principle, is what it sounds like. Okay, just wanted to be clear.
And I guess my kind of curiosity is this wasn't part of the conversation, like when we were kind of talking about these boundary changes. So I just feel like we're asked to make this decision. And it does feel a little like jarring. I mean, I can understand what you know, why, like it makes sense, but, I don't know, I'm just like processing it, I guess, you know, because I mean, boundary changes it's a huge undertaking as it is, and it's you know, I think in our district, like even there wasn't like, you know, just, you know, we pivoted a little bit when, you know, folks were kind of like, wait, I already started the process and now you're saying I can't do it, and so we pivoted that way and like let the folks that had already started the process kind of keep going, which is great. And now it's kind of, you know, this piece and so I don't know. And then it's hard because I look at these schools and they are the schools, when I look at kind of what we're about to hear on this World's Best Workforce Report, they're also the schools that they are our bucket of schools that have the highest percentage of the concentration of our white students. And so kind of there's that connection that I'm kind of thinking too, and then I feel like we're kind of shutting these schools off. So I don't know, I don't have a question, I'm just kind of, I don't know, processing it a little bit, I think, right now. And so, according to the statute, Amy, 1% of the total enrollment at each grade level in the district, like what does that equate to?
John?
Sorry, I know you're not the mathematician, but.
So today we have about 1,390 kindergartners, so that means 139 kindergartners is 1%. So we can stop once there are 139 kindergarten open enrollees across the entire district. That's typically intended for the I'm going to stop a grade level.
Yeah.
And say no more in first grade for all of Osseo area schools. Because of just the unique nature of our demographics, I don't ever see us making that decision on a grade level basis. I think our decision has much more to do with capacity. And then just, you know, the Aspen Ridge thing to me is almost like, here's your probationary year, that's not the right word, but your practice year to kind of get settled and get in. And since I don't remember what our rough staffing estimate of how many teachers we're gonna be, positions will be come out of Fernbrook, but it's a pretty big number, 13, 15. And that's just classroom teachers, not however the ratio
It's
is
like a total of roughly 40 staff.
Yeah, it's a huge move and a huge shift. Like the culture of that building is gonna change. And we're worried about that, and we're also trying to figure out how do we navigate that right with the team, the teachers, the building leaders, so they can all handle it.
And just to speak to more, we needed the information from the board because we had to get information out to open enrollment by.
Well, so the deadline started on the 15th, so people can start coming in. So by taking action now, you're still allowing people choice to go, oh, I was going to apply for open enrollment, but you're going to limit it, so I'm going to wait and see what next year brings. You know, but so then I want to open enroll. Maybe I live in Minneapolis and say, okay, I'm not going to be able to go to Osseo. Maybe I'll go ask Ridley if they have openings. So you're not making that person wait till August or till even in the spring to say, okay, now we're going to make a decision. You're trying to be a little bit more thoughtful to give them some choices.
So what would be the impact if the board needed more time and make a decision in December?
It'd still be fine in December because, frankly, even though the window is October 15 through January 15, as long as you turn in your application in that time frame, the decision gets made by January 15th. So it's not like we're denying people on October 20th. Now, if the board had taken action, we would let folks know, you know, hey, you're applying, but the board's already taken action. There's a close at Maple Grove Senior High. So I think I'm answering that question correctly. It wouldn't impact the acceptance or denial of applications, and it wouldn't impact our staffing, which doesn't take place until the spring. I'm just talking out loud. If anyone thinks different, my
Well,
answer.
people, like after seeing the boundary change happen, people might want to be able to pivot if they were selecting one of those schools. That may be a concern if we wait too long.
Well, one of the
But they
reasons
wouldn't have an answer until.
Yeah.
Well, we gotta remember, it's not in-district
Yes.
resident students. It's
That's what
only-
I'm saying, like
yeah,
if they're
open
selecting
enroll.
Fernbrook or the Aspen Ridge, they might go, oh, never mind, I'm gonna pick this other school.
That's
Yeah,
true.
it gives them the opportunity is can I go open enroll the Rush Creek?
Mhm.
We're not limiting that to.
So on the application, it's option 1, option 2, option 3 that parents put down, and then there's also and you can list more, right? So
Mhm.
within the application, it's anticipated that you may not get your number 1 choice.
Would it help the board at all to make a decision at the board meeting next week on Maple Grove Senior and Maple Grove Middle to open enrollment and then have more time to think on it for the December?
Well, I don't need more time, honestly. We, at Maple Grove Senior and Maple Grove Middle have been closed. It makes sense to continue to keep them closed. I do think, and then the other two, it makes sense to me because I don't think it's right that we would have our schools open to non-residents and not make them available as one district for our residents and all of our folks. I can't support having schools open to non-residents that are not open to our own district, just on principle. So I don't need more time.
Just to piggyback on that, it does say on our website that we're currently not accepting open enrollment or in-district transfer specifically for Fernbrook and Maple Grove Senior High. That's how we've been acting.
That was from this past year.
Last 7 years. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't need more time. I would vote for all 4 to be closed for similar reasons, but I also feel like this is a really flexible approach and gives people time to make their decisions, but also our district time, like we have a full year. It's not like we're locked into this for multiple years, which I really appreciate. And we can analyze data and even come back to it mid-year if we need to. So I appreciate that a lot.
And to be very frank, we need to develop the process that we haven't had to do in the past. We just kind of said, okay, well, if this building's open, we'll accept open enrollment. And we didn't really look at the consequences to what other buildings that student would eventually go to. We're doing that a little bit more thoughtfully now, but we need to develop a process, which once we can work together and figure out the process, then we can go probably come up with a number, as you had recommended, Thomas, to say, okay, we're going to recommend this many at these schools that feed this way, and this many at these schools that feed this way, and however that works, so that we're really intentional. And then we know, okay, we're always managing a certain number of kids in open enrollment that are making their way through, and a certain number of kids in new district transfer that are making their way through to this building, so that, again, we can manage it, we can make sure there's plenty of space for the residents, and we're keeping the plane mostly full so that we're maximizing and just it's kind of the best bang for your buck. And trust me, it's hard for me I know the money that comes in from an open enrolled student. And that's today that's like $22,000 per kid. That's a big chunk of money. It takes 5 kids, and we have just paid a teacher for the year.
And we have 1,600 kids open enrolled,
Yep.
right? So we have 21,000 students. So we're not quite to 10% of our kids are open enrolled kids, but they're about 8% of our population is open enrolled. So we're kind of used to quite a bit of movement in this district. John put up the numbers for in-district transfer. So, I can't speak to how the calls you guys get, but at the enrollment center, there's a lot of calls coming in, right? Because folks aren't used to in-district transfer being, having a moratorium. And then also almost 10% of the people doing open enrollment as well. So this this year and a half of resetting with boundary changes, it is a big deal. People in the community and families are experiencing it. Without going too far down the rabbit hole, we've actually added an additional once-a-month meeting for the enrollment capacity team because we're already getting a number of requests for people to not have to follow the boundary changes, right? So people now are emailing us on why they believe they should have an exemption to not have to do the boundary change. Right, so we're adding some meetings with that, and I think that's only going to increase.
As the letters go out this
next
week.
month, we said, is it next week?
Maybe late this week.
This
So
week.
potentially this week, people will.
By the way,
community members
letters
will
are
get
going out
letters.
to families if their address is changing this week.
Yeah, they'll get notification just in case you already didn't know. This is the school your child will be attending next year. So there will be a number of families that, for whatever reason, didn't realize there was boundary changes happening right now. That will happen. So we think these things are going to ratchet up, and some of this moratorium, in my opinion, allows us to ensure that we get all the students at the right school next year and see where everyone settles, and then we get to relook at capacity. And I would add, we've typically handled this administratively. And so I think this is an effort to make the school board more aware of the amount of work that we do around movement in this school district, and how we look at building capacity, staffing capacity, open enrollment. You know, you're already surfacing some things like, I don't think it's fair that people outside of the district can get to a school when in-district transfer. Well, we're going to get to do some work sessions where you get to learn all about state statutes and what takes precedent and how all this movement happens, right? So those are just a couple of, that's why we're bringing it to you now, to say these are things we've typically done administratively, right? But we want it to come to the board to say, no, it needs board approval when we're going to literally close a school to open enrollment. So those are just from my perspective and someone who's overseen the enrollment center for 15 years. This is a different scenario, and they're difficult decisions, right? Because this is where a young person is going to go to school, and the families have a lot of different reasons. There's not a single school that doesn't have kids leave that school and go to a different school in our system, and vice versa. Every one of our schools has kids leave it, and every one of our schools has kids come to it in district transfers, right? And right now our lowest open enrollment school, well, besides Fernbrook, because that's been closed, is Rice Lake. Only has 23 kids that open enroll into it, but Park Center has 350. So there's 350 kids that open enroll in Park Center, right? So there's a wide range of people that make these choices. So I think you get what I'm coming from. We want this as a part of the boundary change. We think it's a good opportunity to reset with the board and say, here's how we manage all of this movement, because this is a high movement school district, right? Some schools don't take open enrollment. Some districts don't take open enrollment, right? Or allow in-district transfer.
Yeah.
But that was some of, I think, Kelsey,
Thank
what
you,
you
Brian.
were bringing up.
Well, yeah, I mean, I really appreciate you guys bringing this to the board. I think it speaks to, I think we need to have these healthy dialogues, and by no means, I mean, I think that, you know, my questions, it's hard to isolate to this, as a board member, when we're not in a day-to-day, to isolate, to simplify it, to distill it to, like, kind of just like, are we going to take in people outside or not, when there's a lot that I'm thinking, right? Like, I look at what's coming next, what we're hearing about, and like balancing around equity. I think about, we have under, capacity schools, right? I mean, we've had these conversations, and like, and then this whole, the boundary changes, it's a complex process, and I don't know the ins and outs of every, part of it, and it impacts so many, and I also think it's, as this discussions happen, I mean, there's been some clarifications and confusion just around some of how it's being like talked about, or even like presenting. So I feel like if it's confusing for us, it's probably confusing for everyone else, that's not in a day-to-day. So I appreciate, you bringing this to us and having this discussion and being, so open with it. And I look forward to our future discussions around our enrollment and especially around that in-district transfer piece, because I think it's something that I know I've had personal experience in my family around, and it's been frustrating. And so, and I also see the value of having open enrollment, and I think that just adds so much also value to our district as well. And I trust the team. I know you take great care in this. So I do think it's a really big deal, though, to do this. Like, I don't take it lightly, and that's why I'm a little like, I think as you've laid it out, it seems like going forward, I mean, this is the right decision, because it's not final, but I do have hesitation in that, like, it is a big decision, and it feels heavy, it feels big. But again, I will say I trust the process, and I do look forward to our spring conversation around this.
And I appreciate your guys' vulnerability and transparency around this and bringing it to us. Like, that's much appreciated on my end, just being able to see some of the back end conversations that happen, and so that doesn't go unnoticed. Thanks for sharing all that.
Yeah, we talked about enrollment maybe more than we should.
We dream about enrollment.
And the nice thing with this is one of the side benefits that when you do make the decision to formally close a school is we're required to track every kid that applied and didn't get into that school, because we have to report it back to the state. So we also have that information going forward. And I'm excited to see. We know what the boundary changes, and I'm not going to say I wrapped up enrollment, but we're really close. We're not showing under capacity anywhere, not a single building. based on our enrollment projection for next year. So that's a good thing. Now we've got to be careful as we, and take, the measured approach that the HR's team, especially working with DLTL, to make sure that we get the staff appropriately moved in a timely fashion, and that's a long process. So that's one of the reasons why we're doing enrollment early, is to try to, again, make the longest runway possible so people can have some time, because it takes time. It's change. It's a ton of change.
And just looking at our number of residents in Maple Grove is amazing. So it was at the point where Fernbrook kept growing and growing and growing, and I'm like, where are they coming? It's actually single-family homes. It's not like the people are going to be there 2 years and then leave. So, and they're constantly building more. So we're looking at inter-district and we're looking at open enrollment. We have just residents. We got to think about it. Are just straight-up residents that live in those areas. And of course, they're going to get it. So, yeah, Fernbrook took my breath away this year. So, yeah. How many kindergarten sections have we had in Fernbrook?
I think it's eight now.
8.
Yeah.
Fernbrook
And
has,
this year we added 2.
We had 2
today,
this
Fernbrook
year
has 1,876 new housing units that are currently in
that are
process.
coming in. That are
That's
coming
just in
in.
Fernbrook's area.
Yeah.
That doesn't include the 1,100 that are right outside it, because we can't count it. So let me keep track of them.
All right, Director Mitchell, you good?
Good, thank you.
All right, thank you.
So keep reaching out to us. You all know how to find us and have more conversations. But sorry to put that heavy weight on you, but we wanted to share. Share the joy. It's a good thing. It's a good problem to have. But all right. So our next group is here. So Dr. Bass, I'll have you introduce the CACR, Comprehensive Achievement and Civic Readiness, which in the old days was called World's Best Workforce. So.
Thank you, Dr. Heil. Good evening, Chair Prince, Vice Chair Brooks, members of the board, distinguished guests in the audience. Tonight's presentation brings forward 2 key areas of statewide accountability. As Dr. Heil said, the Comprehensive Assessment and Civic Readiness report, formerly known as World's Best Workforce, and our Achievement Integration Annual Reports. The data shared tonight will highlight not only where we are seeing positive movement, but also where we must continue to focus our attention to ensure that all students have equitable access to rigorous, high-quality learning experiences. So I want to extend my sincere gratitude to Dr. Kine and Dr. Walker for their partnership, enthusiasm, and intentional collaboration in co-presenting tonight's update. So their approach reflects the spirit of alignment we're striving for as a system, one that does not silo the work of achievement, integration, and readiness, but instead weaves them together in service of student success. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Kine and Dr. Walker. Thank you.
Good evening, thank you. Tonight we have 2 outcomes. We're going to look at some data points for both the comprehensive assessment for readiness and for achievement and integration, and really talk about what are we doing in the name of continuous improvement to continue to improve people's business. Just our connection to our strategic priorities for the comprehensive assessment civic readiness. We're really focusing on that priority B2 to build and nurture a culture of achievement by providing content-rich, rigorous, and equitable and individualized pathways, particularly B1 with high-quality core instruction and interventions. So as Dr. Heil said, CACR, or Comprehensive Assessment of Civic Readiness, replaces World's Best Workforce. The goal that came off from World's Best Workforce is that all students are ready to read by 3rd grade, and what replaced it is all students are prepared to be lifelong learners. So there's still 5 goals. That goal has changed.
Good evening, everyone. Michael Walker here to talk about the achievement integration, and we also have 4 goals. There has to be an achievement goal, an integration goal, and then a teacher equity goal. And so our first goal is we will provide support for specialized programming to seek racial integration gap reduction by 1% each year. The second goal that we have is achievement gap between students of color, and Minnesota State goal of 85% as measured by proficiency on the NCAA test. Will reduce by 2% each year for identified groups. Goal 3 is around the percentage of staff of color working in Osceola area schools will increase by 1% each year. And the baseline at that time was 14.9%. And so we're going to increase that 2% each year over the course of those 3 years. And then the final goal that we have is increase graduation rates for our American Indian students by 4%. And so you'll see us talk about those goals throughout the
Can I ask a really quick question? This is bad for a superintendent to ask you this here. So one of the CACR goals are all racial and economic gaps between students. How do we know what students have an economic gap?
That is a great question.
Because that's private information.
Yes.
Oh, okay, I was curious, okay.
Yeah.
So we can't measure any improvement there.
Not in economic, yeah, okay.
So the first goal is all children are ready for school. In ASIA, we use our TS goal, or teaching strategies goal, with our BPK students. And our goal for the 24-25 school year was to grow from 30% in the fall, spring to 81% in the spring. We fell short of that goal. The reason there's not a baseline score for this year, which is data we've previously shared, is because we have extended the testing window to ensure that we are screening more students in the fall. The other goal that we're using is our kindergarten and first grade readiness. The READ Act requires us to give certain subtests within Fastbridge to look at, in this case, word segmenting. And as a high school social studies teacher, I had to look at what word segmenting was and learn it. Yep. And so it is really knowing the word.
I picked up on it right away.
I did. I picked up on it really quickly. The letter sounds. So you can see the example in the lower right-hand corner. We have fish and cat, and those are the sounds. And so identifying letter sounds is a really important foundational reading skill. And this is our fall data. This is the first year we've isolated just this subtest. And that both kindergarten and first grade are above the national average in this skill area for this year, which is really exciting data for us.
So now we're going to step into the racial and economic gaps. We're really focusing more on the racial gaps around students. And so the first one is, again, connected to our goal of around decreasing the reading proficiency for MCA's test. As you can see, our data shows a persistent racial gap in reading proficiency for our Black students. And so it also shows it for our American Indian students. And so we know that there's an area that we need to grow in, and that is one of our top priorities. But as we get down later in the presentation, you'll hear some of the strategies that we're using to try to address the issues that we see around this gap here in reading proficiency.
Did you state what the grade levels were for this? The taking it, who
It's
takes the
combined, yes,
test?
it's combined.
But what grades?
It would be 3 through 10.
3 through 10, everyone. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Same
you,
for math
sweetheart.
proficiency, right? So math proficiency is same is one of our bigger gaps that we have. So it's really significant, as you can see, with less than half of our students meeting or exceeding the grade level. And so we definitely know that there's an issue that we have to address here, but there is gaps that we are aware of that we know that we need to address. And so this is, again, what are we trying to do? And there's some strategies that we're using to try to get through this, to get this changed, but it's a work in progress, right? So make sure that we know that it's a work in progress. This is the areas that we're focusing on to try to reduce these, but these are the gaps that are persistent in our system. And then next, we have our 4-year graduation rate. And so here in this document, or on this graph, it really shows the gap between our specific groups. So you see here that one of the bigger gaps is our American Indian students with their racial equity gap around trying to graduate at 90%. And so that becomes an issue for that. We still see some of our specialized groups as well that has a large gap. We look at our multilingual learners, also have a 21% gap. And then one of the larger gaps is for our students who are experiencing homelessness. And so you see a 31% gap in their graduation rates. And so this is the issue that we see. Again, I know that we've had some good data around our graduation rates as a system, but when we look at some of our specialized groups, we still see some gaps that persist. So there's some areas that we can really work on.
Our third goal is all students are ready for college and career. And our first measure is our MCA proficiency from last spring. So reading and math are both taken in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. Science is only taken in 5th grade. For reading, in elementary, we're approximately 4% below the state average. And I think one of the things to really think about here is that we asked our teachers to implement 2 new literacy curriculums last year. And typically when that happens, we would see a larger dip because of that implementation dip, right? So 4%, I think, is a pretty solid continuation of where we were. It is actually 2% lower than what we were last year. So what didn't drop as much as maybe what research would predict. And you can see that in math, we are the same as the state, and in science, we are 3% below the state average. This is middle school. We're 2% below the state average in reading, 3% in math, and 3% in science. Last year, we were 7% below in science, and so we made a huge gain in that science area in middle school. And lastly, at high school, reading is taken at 10th grade, math at 11th grade, and science after they take life science. Osseo is below in reading by 2%, math in 5%, and 4% in science. And last year, we were 3% below in reading, so we made some progress on the state this year. 4% in math, so we went down one, and then 5% in science. So we actually narrowed that gap between the Osseo average and the state average. This is another goal in the comprehensive assessment and civic readiness is our ACT composite scores. So the dark purple is our ACT composite over the last 5 school years. That ACTs, we provide funding for every 11th grader to take it during the school day. And our composite score is 19.3 for this past year. We're going back up. The yellow or the gold is pre-ACT. We also pay for every 10th grader to take the pre-ACT. It's a paper test. The reason we deliver it on paper is because students get to take the test booklet and the answers, once they're scored, back and look at what they've done, how they've done. And so what we are noticing is when we started that, so the 22-23, the 18.3, those were the students who took the ACT in purple, and 19.1. So what we hope to see is that that trend of our composite score in purple will start to trend upwards, because what the research shows is once you've taken a practice standardized test, you know the formula, you know the tricks. So we're hoping to see that, and we're working with our college and career readiness counselors on what does that look like? How does that work? What are we doing intentionally in schools to continue on this trend? Our next goal is all students graduate from high school. This is data for the class of 2024. So remember, we won't get the class of 2025 data until next May. So we're really looking back about 18 months. But for the class of 2024, our graduation rates increased by 3%. So we're getting really close back to that 2018 level. And in addition to that, we also have had a decrease in our dropout rate. And so really thinking about how do we continue to address our dropout prevention work. This next graph is the graduation and continuation rates. So some students may not meet the requirements for graduation by the time some of their classmates do, but they may choose to continue on, whether it is in an alternative setting, in a credit recovery program, or at our transition center. And so these numbers combine those two pieces and look at who's continuing on. And for the class of 2024, all groups exceeded the state identified benchmark of 80%, except for our American Indian students. And Dr. Walker's going to talk about their graduation rates.
Yep, and so as you see in this graph, for the last couple of years, we have done well with our American Indian students. And when I talked with Ethan, he is very aware to say we have to be very mindful about our graduation rates for our American Indian students based on the small n, or the small number size. So one student not graduating can have a huge impact on what that percentage looks like. And so we just have to be very mindful of that. And so it can be 1 or 2 students that have an issue, and then that can have a huge impact on what the percentage looks like. But what I will say is that they have been very intentional about connecting with some of the students. When they see them on a list, they created a list of students who are maybe behind or needing some support in graduation or towards credit accumulation. And so they are meeting with those students individually to help get them on that path towards on-time graduation. So again, we're doing better than what we had in the past, but again, just want to be mindful that the small n can have a huge impact on graduation.
So before we talk about our fifth goal, we're going to talk about some next steps in this area. One of the things that I mentioned was our dropout prevention, and that really includes an early warning system. And so what does that look like? There are 3 components to that, and one of them is attendance. So looking at period attendance and parties. Academics, looking at, so going back up, attendance. Our benchmarks are really high for attendance. To be considered not in danger of being at risk for dropout, it would be above the 90th percentile in attendance. So you're attending class frequently. And at high school, that looks at period attendance as well as daily attendance. Academics, we are looking at students who are failing 1 or more classes on a daily basis. So We have a new system called RTI Stored that does that. It pulls in grades nightly from Schoology and has a dashboard that leaders and counselors can look at and say, oh, these students need some attention, we need to talk about that. And then behavior, for students who've had referrals for discipline that go into the system. Any student who has more than 3 is considered to be at risk of dropping out, and that code stays the entire year. So if I mess up in, let's say, October, Jill kind of makes a bunch of mistakes and is foolish because she's a 9th grader, which is what I taught for a long time, right? Which happens. I will always be coded as red because that signals to the people looking at that data, hey, we need to just be mindful that this student had some issues in the past. How are we making sure that we're still paying attention and not forgetting about them? Additionally, we are working with our college and career readiness coordinators at each of the high schools on the implementation and use of Zello. So Zello replaces the Minnesota Career Information System that we've been using for an eternity. And it has a bunch of different features. Students can take career interest inventories. They can look at potential careers and research what classes should I be taking, what colleges have this information. And it has a bunch of analytics that we are just digging into. We are doing a soft rollout with it at high schools this year and really getting into it 6-12 next year as we think about the CTE strands that will be opening at each of our high schools. How do we sort of backwards map out what the possibilities are for students?
And Jill, doesn't Zello eventually has it for the babies too, elementary?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And continue professional learning on high-quality core instruction, standards-based instruction and grading. We're partnering with the University of Minnesota and our leaders on learning walks and walkthroughs to look at what are students experiencing each and every day in our classrooms, and how do we make sure that we are ensuring that all students are receiving standards-based instruction at the grade level. And RTI Stored is part of what we're incorporating into our PLT process. And we look at our FastBridge data and we say, okay, I know that I need to go from point A to point Z by the end of the year. What are those steps along the way that we need to take as instructors to move students? And who are the students that we need to move? Really thinking about how do we humanize people in a system that sometimes with data doesn't feel super humanizing. And lastly,
yeah, I'll talk about last. So last we have the site use of the equity transformation cycle. You all have heard us talk about this several times. We are fortunate enough this year to have, in the next couple of years, to have Shane Saphir, one of the authors of Street Data, do some work with our equity teams. And the reason why this is really important is that each school is supposed to have an equity challenge that they're focusing on. And the equity challenge is really about them naming what areas can they do better at when they see students not performing at whatever rate that we want to see them performing at. So they're looking at the data, so that could be MCA reading data or math proficiency data, whatever they're having at their school site, right, their issues that they want to address. And then they're saying, we're going to have an equity challenge based on that. And they have to be very specific on who they're targeting, what is the thing that they want to address, and then how they want to address that. And one of the key components of that, I think you've heard me talk about this, is really about going out and listening to the students' experiences, so then we can take that information and do something different with it within our system to support our students. And so this is really key and important to that work that we're talking about around the data that we're trying to address, that you're going to speak about up top.
and then the last goal for the comprehensive assessment and civic readiness is all students are prepared to be lifelong learners. And this is a goal that's not mandated to us from the state of Minnesota. We have some flexibility. And so for this year, we selected all students will be lifelong learners from our student survey. This sort of pairs very nicely. This is data that you've seen before through the vision card work. It's from our 24-25 student stakeholder survey. And it's each of the 5 questions. And the percent of students responding yes, always, or mostly yes to each of those 5 questions. So since the student stakeholder survey is under revision, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this piece, and we'll spend some more time looking at it and really talking about how it weaves into the rest of our continuous improvement work with sites at the next comprehensive assessment civic readiness presentation.
So we wanted to break at this point for pause and process moment because we've gotten feedback that sometimes when we have so much data, it's nice to be able to pause along the way to be able to reflect and offer some perspective. Two questions that we toss out here is from your perspective, what do you see that could be strengthened, and then in terms of the things that you recognize as strong, how might we further amplify those things? So those are two prompts, and then of course whatever you would like to ask.
Board members?
I mean, I just want to say, I mean, I feel like we said this, but thank you so much because I feel like, I mean, when I was on my, well, I know the names changed from this, but the World's Best Workforce, but in the past when I've seen this report, it has been really coming kind of from a place of like, I don't know, it just always felt like you put a lot of onus on the students and like, it was almost felt like what they were doing wrong, or I mean, it just is coming from that kind of a place. And what I've seen coming back and like hearing what you guys say have been talking about is it's very like really strength based. Like there's a solution. Like, well, what are we doing as a system to really be held accountable for their success? And I really see this through the data. And also I really appreciate just Jill, what you said, just really humanizing the data and making it really about, you can just feel that. And as hard as it is, I mean, there's conversations all the time about whether we use MCAs or not, and there's a huge push for opt-outs, and regardless of all that, and like, there's some merit to that. I just really appreciate just what you guys, I feel like this is just improved like leaps and bounds, and I think you can really feel it. So I just more want to just say I think it's great. Like I don't even, yeah. Jazz hands.
Well, I think to your point, while we're not necessarily seeing the test score movement, the nature of what we're talking about, we've, over the past 2 years spent quite a number of work sessions on specific strategies. We had the deep dive into math and into reading, and we know that's still going to come through, and we know that's going to first, just the, we're going to have to see that influence the younger grade levels to see it come through all the way up, and it takes time. But I think you've been bringing to us the strategies that you want us to be supporting and approving. So I feel very close to what's kind of happening behind the numbers, even though we know they're not where we want them to be quite yet.
So beyond what's already been said, I think what stuck out to me were the graduation rates. One, just a big question mark of like what are the 5-year, 6-year graduation rates, but also particularly looking at, I kind of circled or pointed at a few of them: American Indian, Hispanic, are EL and homeless and special ed. So I wanted to kind of connect that to the other side that was on dropout rates. And I appreciated that you kind of talked about the early warning signs. I was kind of wondering beyond that, like what are like the interventions that we have in place for those students? When we look at past students that have dropped out, are the early warning signs, like is that consistent? Is that accurate with what we're seeing with past students that have dropped out? And then how are we offering like alternatives early enough for them? So whether that's OALC or 279 online, like what's happening kind of behind the scenes once we have those early warning indicators?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a few things. We have a very robust after-school credit recovery program that students are in and succeeding. We are offering standards-based options, so instead of having to repeat the entire course, we can look at which standards students aren't proficient in yet and just target that learning that they need to redo. So that's one piece. I think an additional piece is we have data days with each of the high schools. We have just finished one today, where we look at which students are currently at risk by advisor. And then are they in any programming? So are they spending in Avid? Are they in Real Talk? And for students who are, we alert the people who run those programs to say, hey, this student has these indicators of dropout. Additionally, if they're not in a program, then we work with the counselors and the administrators to make a connection with them, because what's going on? Is anyone talking to this student? I think the other piece that we're actually just talked about as a Learning and Achievement Leadership Group is your point about what have we seen in the past, and is it holding up in the present in terms of indicators. So that's a study that we're undertaking right now to look at that. I think I got all of these questions.
Yeah, you did. Thank you. And I think beyond the 3, and I know this is like harder data for us, but also just thinking about these students and what's going on outside of school, that is probably as important, if not more. So whether that is family, or if they're working a lot, or pregnancy, or whatever that might be, just thinking, going back to my high school, like if we know that those things are coming up and are a part of impacting their experience as students, that should be in there as well, to kind of steer them in a direction that is maybe a little more customized for their learning.
Well, and that points to 2 things, right? That sense of belonging, but also the use of street data, and how are we getting to those stories? And we can't get to those stories if the student isn't connected with someone. So how are we making sure that each and every student has an adult in the building to do that? So yes, we agree with that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I had a couple questions, and maybe it's just how this is my first sit through with all this. And I know this is specific to the racial and economic disparities, but reduce the reading proficiency gap. I do see we're well below that 85%, but then when we go to, for the state of Minnesota goal, where was it? There was another, here we go, the proficiency, where it says state is like 50 for math and 46 for reading. What's the difference? What's the 85 come from?
So the 85 is the goal that we expect each and every student to meet. And then what you're looking at there is by grade level, right? Okay. So this graph on the screen combines all of the grade levels, and that breaks it out into elementary, middle school, and high school, and just their level of proficiency overall.
And then it would be, I think it's really vital to, and I know this might be a really hard ask, but being able to figure out how we can help our socioeconomically disadvantaged students and collecting data around that and the impact it has on them. And we see it show up in that homeless population graduation rates. So I think that would be a really vital piece that we could work on. I know that's hard, but important. Thanks for doing all this work. It's super helpful, and I feel like it's presented in a really easy to digest way, aside from my misunderstanding.
So we'll just move on to achieving integration goals and a couple of items we want to share on that. So these are, for the achieving integration plan, we have to have a lot of strategies that we're undertaking to try to accomplish those 4 goals. And I'll just talk about 1 or 2 of them in each one of the columns. But as we were talking about the MCA reading gap that we were talking about. So one of our strategies that we're using for that is high operational practices, which up here on the screen it says NUA programming and site implementation work. It's really around Dr. Yvette Jackson's work around high operational practices and how are we working with our students to have positive or asset-based conversations, and how are we making sure they feel belonged. So this year we are focusing on 2 of those high operational practices. One is situating the learning in the lives of students and amplifying student voice. right? And as Dr. Collins said earlier, we know that when students feel like they belong, they feel like they're connected, it makes education and learning a little bit more easier when the stories relate to them and in their own community and their culture. And so we're being intentional about how are we ensuring that is happening in the classrooms, right? And so that's one of the strategies that we're using at our sites to support the increase in that reading literacy rates. And then if we look in the second column, we look at one of the things you heard me talk about around comprehensive district-wide equity training and support. Right, so it's really important that we are really working with our leaders to say, how are you leading this work? How are you being intentional about focusing on the data of the marginalized and those that are furthest from justice within our system, right? How are we being mindful to look at the data? How are we addressing that data? And then what strategies are we using to do that? Again, we want to make sure that we're doing this with community and not to community. So part of that is how am I asking the right questions? How am I bringing those voices to the table that are typically not brought to the table to hear and learn what can we do differently from that? And then the last one, I'll just say, the acronym you kept getting tripped up on, I do too, NWSISSD. Did I get it right? One of those? Sure. But our partnership with them, right? That's one of our partnerships where, again, it's connected to the magnet schools, but it's also connected to other districts who are doing this work, and how do we partner with them to learn from a collective of other folks who are addressing some of the same issues that we're facing as well. So it kind of brings us together to support and work with each other. So those are just a few of the strategies, but as you can see, there's a list that kind of goes on, but we're working through those strategies in each of our sites. And this is really about the dollars and cents. So as part of the Achieving Integration, there's a formula that you have to use in order to spend the dollars, right? So 80% has to be focused on direct student services. No more than 20% can be used for professional development. And then again, no more than 10% can be used for administrative costs. And so we have met that goal. And I mean, I know those numbers up there are pretty small, but we are definitely higher in student services. So we're usually around 83-84% that we spend in that area. And then a little bit less in administrative costs. We're usually around 7 to 8% in that area. So we're staying within what NDE wants us to focus on in that regard, but obviously putting a little bit more to direct student services. Here is something that I think we talk about. We had the conversation earlier around staff retention, and so as we know, one of our goals is again staff retention. And it's not just about retaining staff. We have to also realize that having a diverse staff population is really important and key to our students, right? The mirror, I mean, I know we may not talk about it enough, but the mirror, they see people who look like them. That is very important that they see those folks in the classroom, in the buildings that are serving them, so that they can see that, hey, there's an opportunity for me to be in education, or that I see someone that looks like me and can connect with me. That also brings that sense of belonging. So if you look at the data, very small up here, but for the last few years, we have done a really good job of retaining our staff of color. And so in this trajectory, we have actually met this goal based on MDE's definition. And so we are doing a great job, but that doesn't mean we get to stop and relax, right? What things are we doing intentionally to build those connections and that trust and that sense of belonging for our staff, right? So we do have affinity spaces for our staff. We do have groups that they can connect with, again, to bridge that connection in that community. Next, we have what we call racially isolated schools. So as part of Achieving Integration, in order for us so as we receive those dollars, we are designated, I want to say it's 10 schools in our system who are considered racially isolated. And what that means is that if your school is 20% more of students of color in it than what the district average is, then you will be considered racially isolated. So in our situation, we have 63% of our district is students of color, and so then these 10 sites have a percentage higher than that 63%, more than 20%. So they would have to be above 60 or 83% in order to get that designation. So these are the sites that are designated as racially isolated. So we got Birch Grove, Edenbrook, Fair Oaks, Garden City, Palmer Lake, Park Brook, Zanewood, Brooklyn Middle School, Northview Middle School, Park Center High School.
Nice.
I'm trying to get these acronyms, so I'm doing good. I'm a year in, so I should have known them all by heart, right? But I got it right there, right? So those are the ones that are considered racially isolated. Now this next slide is a slide that you all asked for last year when we came, and that was about what does it look like in the inverse of that? So what about our schools that are more white? Right? And so when we look at that data, so we use the same kind of format. So our district average for white students is 37%. And these are the schools that would be considered, MD doesn't use that term, so it's hard for me to say racially isolated, because that's not the term that they use in this case. But these would be considered racially isolated if we did it for white students, right? So our schools that would be racially isolated on this graph would be Fernbrook, Basswood, Maple Grove Senior High, Rush Creek, Maple Grove Middle, and Elm Creek. Am I getting all right?
Right.
Okay. So those would be the sites that would be considered racially isolated if we did it in the inverse of what we do, what MDE does. So just wanted to bring that to your attention, that was kind of something that you all had asked for, so I wanted to make sure I brought that to you so you can see that percentage as well. And then, as you all may be aware, the Achievement Integration Program, dollars that we received is on a 3-year cycle, and so this year we are up for renewal. And so as part of that, we have to put together a committee to do some digging into looking at the goals, adjusting goals. Maybe they may be the same, but we have a timeline of what we need to do in that space. So first we have to engage some stakeholders, and we've got to get a committee that is comprised of many different groups. Teachers, administrators, community members, and students on that committee to see what our goals are and how we need to readjust our goals if we need to do that. We'll review that, bring that to you all, because you all have to approve that. So we'll do that by February, and the deadline to submit this to the state is March 15th. So that's when we have to have a finalized submitted plan. And so we're in the process of putting those stakeholders together to have those meetings to decide on what those goals will be for the next 3-year cycle. That's it. Oh, pause and reflect. Yeah.
Are there any questions? I mean, we posed the same questions as the first class. Wanted to make sure again we broke out the presentation in bite-sized chunks so that we could hold a smaller chunk of data for each. Any questions on the achievement integration, those additional pieces?
On this upcoming plan for merge, who are the stakeholders involved in that process?
We don't have a specific names yet, but we know what positions that we want. Like I said, we want to have a principal, assistant principal, we want to have teachers, we want to have students, and we also want to have some folks from the Department of Educational Equity. We need to have a member from APAC. Right, so we have the actual folks who we need to have on that committee. We just haven't got the actual names yet.
Okay.
So we're in the process of recruiting that committee.
It makes me think of like RISE and APA, you know, what we talked about in the other session.
Yeah.
Really leveraging, when we talk about leveraging those committees, like to engage in different things.
And that's what our hope is to have those members of those committees.
I liked what you said about this being done in collaboration with communities, not to communities. So really wanting to hear voices on what communities desire from us, what solutions and improvements they'd like to see from us with them. I think that's really important, especially representation amongst different levels of language, different levels of economics, really different, not the same set of students or the same set of parents. I mean, talking every single time too, and making sure that we just have diversity in thought and representation as we keep coming up with supports and partnerships.
Thank you for acknowledging that, and I'll just say, like, sometimes it's not as easy as we think it is,
yeah.
right? Because we sometimes have to
Yeah.
rebuild trust, or our schools have to rebuild trust with those communities that do feel like they haven't been heard and listened to, and so that takes a little bit of time. So our team, the DOE team, is really working closely with the leaders to say, help you through that process of life and think through what is best and what is possible, because it can be difficult, and sometimes, it's a daunting task sometimes.
So I have a question, maybe, I'm sorry if you answered this, but when you look at the racial integration gap, like what does MDE expect? Like what do they want? Because a lot of it is like where people live, and I mean that's where the socioeconomics, I mean that's where you just, how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go? I mean like the schools only have so much control, so what What do you feel like they expect? I'm just curious.
You're curious? I'm curious too. What I can say is their philosophy is based on Brown versus Board of Education,
Yeah.
1954 philosophy,
Yeah.
which is that integration will be best for those brown kids, right? It will be better if we have them sit next to white students. That is the basic
Kind of the
philosophy.
foundational.
That's the foundation of it.
Which is why it's good to see the inverse,
Mm-hmm.
of
Yes.
that conversation too.
And there is still the lawsuit against the state going on.
Chris Guzman.
Yes, I want to raise that, yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah, okay.
So, yeah. But yeah, they would like us to increase that.
And I think it's another way to offer that is proportionality. So if your district's demographics are that you have 3% students of color, that more of your schools will fall within 3 to 5 points of that than outside of 15 to 20 points of that, right? And we know that that's very difficult.
Could we take the, kind of bouncing off what you're saying, as it varies based on location, how kids are funneled to each school, the boundaries basically, could we pull the data based on that and look within there and see, are we comparable to neighboring boundaries within our district? Like, I don't know, is there a different way we could look at it rather than just across the district?
Well, we're not the only district that has racially isolated schools, right?
Which is
So,
why there's a state law.
which is why there's a state law, right? So we're not the only district that has it. I guess we could look at other districts, but they're going to be in the same boat.
Oh, no, I mean within our district. Like, is it representative of the population within that boundary?
Oh.
Is it
I see what you're saying.
representative
Gotcha.
Right.
versus like,
Okay.
does that make sense?
Because I was just writing down like what other schools are left that's not. So you got Osseo Middle, Osseo Senior.
Yeah.
So how are we immersing our babies there, right? Palmer wasn't there, Woodland wasn't there, Rice Lake wasn't there. So.
Which is that just reflective of the population that lives around those schools? Which we want our schools to reflect our communities.
Yes.
Right.
So then that's the rub that you have, right? Which is why one of the strategies to try to reduce racial isolation in these schools is really around magnet programming, right? So how do you get folks from other communities to come into these community schools? But then,
If they want to move.
well, I was going to say, but then there's a whole racialized component to that, right? Like we know the history of that. Typically, only brown students went to other schools. White communities do not come into the brown communities to attend those schools. So now you have an issue again. So for like our system, we Relate, which is one of our magnet schools. Well, they are meeting the proportion. So they have 61% students of color. So they're right where they should be at as a magnet school. But again, that's more in one of our regular communities versus one of our schools in our more brown communities, like Zanewood, which is not seeing that type of support that folks are coming in to select that school to attend. So again, it's a huge historical piece to it. You got redlining, you got all these different other aspects that
Thank
kind
you
of
for
impact
unpacking
it.
that.
Yeah, no
I
problem.
appreciate it.
I mean, I think when we had this conversation, the most important thing we can do is ensure that all students are succeeding at the highest level at every school in our district. Because I don't foresee us being able to shift the makeup of our schools overnight. So.
But I think that's why this conversation about our enrollment, like all of that, it's like, that's why I think this all matters, as we're making informed decisions and directions and kind of giving that, because it does matter. And like we want all of our schools to be excellent. We want Avid in all of our schools, like stuff like that, like we want, all those things.
Just like that one.
What?
That's the first time I heard that.
I'm just saying.
And I don't want to at risk of causing more work for Kay.
Kay's like, why me?
Like, I'm even curious, do we have the data on, we know that 30% of our kids choose different schools. Like, do we know their racial identity, right? And how does that impact our demographics? Because, we've got 30% of our students choosing to go elsewhere. I don't know, maybe it does fall along the same lines, I don't know. But I think something that Erica asked made me think of that too.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, it is.
I don't know what it is, but.
Understanding the why.
The why,
Yeah.
is huge.
Gentlemen trying to understand the why. I would say we did a school survey, like a kind of like, it's not like an exit survey, but like families that are choosing other options. It's been 4 years now since we did that though, but something definitely worth diving into. But it didn't settle so much on the demographic piece of it, so that would definitely be interesting.
Thank you, team.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll move over, and we'll bring in John Morstad's team to go over long-range financial planning.
All right. We're just getting stuff pulled up here. So thank you, Dr. Hiles. This is the next step in the long-range financial planning process, and so we're going to kind of walk through the most recent version and installing some more. So it's a beautiful picture. All right, so as always with all of our long-range financial planning, we always want to start with the strategic priorities to make sure that the long-range financial plan supports all the priorities that are established here. It's important to know that when we set parameters, and we brought this up earlier in October and then carried that information to budget managers, those parameters included that no additional funds for strategic priorities would be assigned for fiscal 27, and so we're recommending that all requests going forward for the fiscal 27 budget should be a net zero change. We'll take a quick look at the long-range financial planning model. Again, this is, you've seen this a number of times before. We'll just kind of give you the quick highlights. This is a very thorough and well-vetted budget process. Important timelines of change to understand the discipline of a solid financial budget planning process. In here you'll find the mission is at the center. Our budget managers areas are the gray ovals. We're currently in number 4, develop annual budget recommendations based on board budget targets. The school board is responsible for the teal areas, guiding principles, connect and align the missions, guiding principles are listed. I'm not going to try to read them all. You can't see them.
We know them by heart.
You know them by heart. So it's the idea is to make sure that this is a data-driven, collaborative decision-making process to measure that we're putting our money where it needs to be, and so we want to make sure we're having that conversation routinely. I'm going to turn over to Kelly for next steps.
Thanks, John. So the next item is our PAIR narrative, and that stands for, again, Program Efficiency, Abandonment, and Redirection narrative. So again, the PAIR asks 6 key questions that are the same as they were in previous years. So first, it's asking what resources are being requested. What's the summary? What's the description of that proposal that's being requested? And then it also identifies in response to influence race and culture in the development of that request, which again is a connection to our mission strategic plan and also to those guiding principles. And then the 4th question is what data is going to be used to measure those results, and then how does the request support equitable student achievement? So again, it's a process connection to our guiding principles. And then the 5th question is what's the proposal's impact or the rationale for that request? And then the last one, which is always important, is it unfair, or do we have to change the board policy so that we're still in compliance with that? So the PAIR narrative is going to be used again for completing that true analysis. And our meeting is January 23rd when we bring our team together. And again, this is a continuous improvement process which is built into the LRP process. And we utilize surveys and then also budget manager debriefs to gather feedback and then implement potential changes. getting quite tiny and long. So it's just for reference up on the screen. In your packets, it's a little bit bigger font. But again, these are our adjustments that were approved by the board for fiscal years 22 through fiscal year 27. So the document shows both our revenue expenditure adjustments for the past 4 years, the current year, and then projects out next year. So when possible, we keep those reductions as far away from our direct instruction as possible. So since COVID and the passage of the operating referendum in November 22, we've had a lot of movement within those expenditures. And to retain our financial position, we use the intentional use of those expenditure targets. So some of those examples are one-time costs that are added and then moved the following year, such as our CARE contract, which we did in 2025. We've done it with strategic investments in 25 and 26. We've done permanent strategic investments where we added in fiscal years 22 and 23. We are purposeful about our alignment of enrollment that occurs on an annual basis with our early projections and then our actual enrollment counts. We also sustained more than $9.7 million in programs and services for 2 years when we were using those federal funds from COVID for 23 and 24, which then allowed us to add those costs back in fiscal year 25. We also reduced programs when needed in this process. We address legislative impacts from specifically 23. So we continue to address our Family Medical Leave Act changes along with our additional staff and the new payroll tax that's coming in 26. We create capacity for operating startup costs for the new elementary. And then we also have impacts from our transportation contract and the FWA changes that we can in fiscal year 27. So this next document is a historical budget trend, and this document shows 10 years of data. So again, we manage our fund balance to stay within that 5% minimum, which is within our board policy, so that's the red line on the document. For fiscal year 26, the current budget, and then 9 years of prior year actual data. So for fiscal year 26, our adopted budget has a planned operating deficit of $22.7 million. That's the green bar being less than the blue bar. And then actual results show that the revenue is greater than expenditures in 7 of the last 9 years. However, the 2 years when expenditures were greater than revenue was in fiscal years 22 and 23. Fiscal year 24 was the first year of our new operating referendum. So you can see that spike there in the green bar, which was then included in our budget.
Trying to make it full screen.
I can't get closer to any because of my phone. So this next document is the organizational complement, which is a budget summary by division. So again, it provides details for our general, nutrition, community service, and capital funds. And we utilize a long-range financial planning process for our budgeting. And our documents then show those changes from year to year. And it also shows what we're buying in fiscal year 26, including our full-time equivalents or FTEs per division, and also by department. So I'm just going to page through that document. Document which is not on the display is the benchmark comparison, so that would be the one that looks like this in your packets. And so we have now 8 financial benchmark districts. We used to have 7 plus OSSEO, now we have 8 plus OSSEO. And we work with our finance team on fiscal team to determine which districts those would be.
I might be projecting voice a little bit more.
This last year. So just to point out a few items that you'll see on that document if I could display it. It's got our fiscal year 25, our students, And then it's got the demographics on those students for fiscal year 24, because the information isn't quite available for 25. But what it would show you is of the districts that are reporting at this time, their revenue range is between 2 to 4%, with ours being 3. And it shows our expenditure range is 3 to 8% depending on the category. And again, ours is 3%. We have 2 districts that are reducing expenditures for fiscal years 27. And our fund balance is the healthiest of all the benchmark districts at this time of everything. So now we can go to the next document that is showing on the screen. And this is our estimated cost spreadsheet. So what this spreadsheet does is it takes our expenditures for the general fund in those 4 big broad categories: salaries, benefits, purchase services, supplies, and others, and then it multiplies it by that factor of 3%. So it says that we can grow our expenditures by about 10.2 million and be within that parameter. And then what we do is we start to fill in this document with known items. So when we have contract settlements and we actually know what our expenses are going to be for fiscal year 27, we put that in this document. When we also have items that are coming out of the budget, for instance, the compensatory flexible time list, we're taking them out of the budget then for fiscal year 27. So we walk through all of those categories for health insurance and then all the other benefits that are associated with our payroll. And then we move down into our purchase services, and we can see the transportation again is an outlier with the contract that was implemented for year 1 of the 10-year contract in fiscal year 26. And then we use the CPI to determine our utilities and other costs. And so at this point in time, we are now having known increases of 2.37% and a remaining capacity of 0.63. So at this point in time, when we look at that previous years, we have more of those expenditures identified than we would at this point in time. So now if we move on to our timeline for our budget process. So this document, again, it shows our key dates in our budget process, and the items that are highlighted in blue, that's where the board takes action. And so tonight, we're about a third of the way down the sheet, where we're asking the board to affirm our direction for our budget managers. We're having another meeting with them this coming Friday. And then on November 18th, next week at the board meeting, we'll have the auditors present the final results, fiscal year 25. And then in December, we'll ask the board to approve the 27 levy for that fiscal year. And then in February, we'll bring the recommendations forward to a work session, and then ask the board to approve those recommendations in February. And then the final step in this process is that June 23rd board meeting, where the board will approve the 27 budget. So this next document is the fiscal year 26 adopted expenditure budget for all the funds that we budget for. So we utilize the long-range financial process for all of these funds, with the exception of the debt service fund. So this pie chart shows all of those funds in relation to each other within the size. And at the beginning of the fiscal year, July 1st, 2025, fiscal year 26, we had a budget approved for $442.5 million combined. Next, we'll transition into our 5-year projections. And the first projection that we're going to look at is the general fund. So the other funds that are presented tonight will also use the same format. Again, it's a high-level visual organizer for our financial forecast. It allows us to have multiple opportunities to view the information. So there are 3 sections to this projection. The top section shows our revenue expenditures, differences, our fund balance, amount, and then percentage for a 7-year window that begins with our actual results for fiscal year 24 and 25, the adopted budget for fiscal year 26, and then projections for fiscal years 27 through 30. There are $6 million in operational adjustments under this chart. Those adjustments are projected to start in fiscal year 28. The assumption section shows the revenues and expenditure assumptions that are going to be used for 27 through 28. 30 at this time. So we've increased our revenue based on current law. So revenue is again going to fluctuate between 2 and 3% on the general or basic family allowance. And then our expenditures, as I've already stated, are going to stay at 3%, which is consistent with previous year tactics, and it's not going to be changed at this time. So therefore, if we spend more than that 3%, we're going to be deficit spending at a greater rate than what our projection shows currently. Then the middle section shows the budget projections for revenues in blue and expenditures in red. And those trend lines of those same colors show the annual actual budget or projection for each of those items. So as you can see, our expenditures are projected to outpace those revenues beginning in fiscal year 26 by 19.7 million. And then the final section looks at our fund balance projection for that same time period. And the green bar represents our actual and projected fund balances for each year. The orange bar then shows the minimum required fund balance of 5%. That's set in board policy. And again, those trend lines show the annual projected fund balances related to the minimum. And as you can see, fund balance is starting to decline in the current year. So it's important to remember that in fiscal year 24, that was the year again that included the first year of the board-approved operating referendum, which was introduced in November of 22. And we're currently close to the cap on our authority, and therefore we can't use that operating referendum as a lever again to increase revenue in the near future. So, as I mentioned earlier, when reviewing those 22 to 27 board-approved adjustments impacting programs and services, the expenditure tactics continue to include the new elementary school, as well as other revenue expenditure tactics. Again, business services is going to continue to work with those departments directly that are impacted by those adjustments to make sure that they're fully incorporated. So as John shared, we will not be creating any strategic investments this year due to our current financial projection. We're going to continue to monitor our financial projection to maintain that board-required minimum fund balance of 5%. So the good news, always good news, under this model, we are not planning for operational reductions for fiscal year 27. So again, we'd like to caution the board, however, that funding flex that we talk about in education is projected for fiscal year 2030, and we'll likely need to address that shortfall earlier so that we maintain that 5% and have a softer financial landing. That's why we're projecting reductions already starting in 28. So again, included in the model right now are current enrollment data, which includes the 15-day drops as of November 1st, and then our preliminary enrollment projections for future years. When the enrollment data becomes updated, we'll update all those projections again and modify those. So that's the general fund, and with that, I'm going to to Jeff to talk about nutrition.
Good evening, Jeff Ansorge, Food Nutrition Services Director. So nutrition services is fund too. So just to recap, it's separate from the general fund. So the revenue that we produce is from sales of food, and we provide breakfast and lunch during the school year to all students, free as of 2023 in July. And we also have after-school snack programs. We've got after-school supper programs. We have Kids Stop before and after-school programs that we support as well. And we have partnerships with Brooklyn Park and Brooklyn Center with the Rec and the Go programs. And those partnerships extend through the school year for park and rec sites when the weather permits. We provide supper and snacks, and during the summer as well, we provide probably 160,000 meals roughly over the summer with the various partners and within our school district as well. So thinking about participation in general, since 2023, July, when the Minnesota Free School Meals was enacted, we saw a significant increase in participation in breakfast and lunch. And then last year, as well as this year, we continue to see increases year over year in that participation. So that's encouraging. It tells me that our staff out there are doing a great job preparing the meals well, and our team here in the office is doing a great job of creating menus and helping to manage the program. So big thank you to them. And looking at this chart, So actual 2025, our fund balance, we increased by 683,000 to leave us at a current fund balance of just under 6.5 million. The adopted budget for 2026 and moving forward through 2030 at this time, we're not projecting any operational reductions in the next 5 years. From a revenue perspective, we assume that we're going to have an increase of 2.75% year over year from our increases from USDA funding, and we've seen that pretty much historically over the past 5 years, anywhere from 2.75 to like 3.5%. So we're being a little bit cautious with the 2.75% increase, and this also includes an assumption of a 3% increase in expenditures yearly. And our minimum fund balance goal is 12%, and that 12% that we're looking at of the fund balance would be ultimately MDE allows us to have 3 months, maximum of 3 months worth of expenditures on hand. So basically right now when we're looking at 2026, we're right at that cusp. And the purpose of that fund balance is really to put back into the program, improve food, go towards increased labor, and also take care of the facilities, whether it's replacing walk-in coolers. This summer coming up, we're doing a dish room project at Osseo Senior just to make it a more functional environment for the staff. So overall, we see in this chart in the middle, our expenditures outpacing our revenues over the next 5 years. But as I said when I started, that we're not expecting any operational reductions in the next 5 years, so we'll be well above that 12% threshold. Turn it over to Ryan.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. All right, so I'm going to cover the Community Service Fund, and I'll keep my comments relatively brief, but probably just 4 main things. The first one you can see, we've moved out of the volatility that we had from 2020 to 2024, so now you see a more steady incline in our revenue and our expenditures, which is fantastic. Also, our trend line to get our fund balance between 7 and 15% is being actualized this upcoming year, so we had a pretty high fund balance coming through 23 and 24, but that is stabilizing, and again, while not required by the state to have a fund balance between 7 and 15%, that's more, in my opinion, for us to, since we're self-funded, have enough in reserves in case we have a bad year or something else comes up, and but also not have that fund balance so high, since 70% of our revenue is through participation fees. We want to make sure that it's affordable, so that's kind of where I come with that. I will say one thing of note that we're considering, and Mike Hewler helped myself and Carrie Cave with last year. We do have a slight change upcoming next year. 2 things. One, we have a new elementary school coming online, so we're going to be adding programming at a school that we hadn't had before. So on another page you'd see we've estimated between $750,000 to $1 million difference in revenue expenditures in the next year, not just because of the new elementary school, but also because of the boundary changes. A couple of our schools, primarily Fernbrook, which has been above capacity, and Steve mentioned this earlier when we added like a couple kindergarten sections. Well, when we did that, we removed community ed programming out of those schools that were over capacity. So we're going to also be bringing back a minimum of 2 classrooms of 4-year-old programming out of community ed back to Fernbrook. So we've got a little bit of a increase in programming for us coming. It's not just shifting kids. I shouldn't say just. There's a lot that happens with boundary changes, but we're going to be bringing back programming and bringing on new programming. So we'll see a year from now how close our projections are, but I think those will be pretty accurate, because we typically, about 20% of the kids at elementary schools participate in our community ed programs on average. So we can kind of guesstimate how many kids we think are going to participate once those schools come back online. And then last, I would say, and then 2 years from now, we'll also be looking at what it might look like for ECNFE to increase their programming at our Crestview repurpose site, right? So we've kind of got 2 years of potential growth here for community ed and programming that I anticipate. And, I would say not as big on the concern list for us, but, this last school year, a number of school districts had federal funding delayed by about a month. That included us in ABE, so we still want to keep a mindful eye on that because we have to make adjustments if we should lose that funding, and that impacts staff. So I just added out there. I'm calm and confident with our budget overall, but that is something to be mindful of. So, long story short, feeling really good. We're way back. Remember, we dropped well below $11 million in revenue in 2020, and we're over $20 million in revenue again, right? So we're back, steady trend line, feeling good about it, but bringing on some more programming based on reopening one school and starting a new school. So those I would say would be kind of the 4 primary things to think about with the community ed budget.
And I'll bring us back to the last document, which is the capital 5-year projection. So again, just awareness that this budget uses a zero-based budget approach, in that every request needs to be made in the dollar amount that's going to be put into this fund for next year. And then the top section of this document shows operational adjustments under the chart. The total for all those years is $800,000 and it's listed on the right. And the assumption section for both revenues and expenditures is set at 0% for those outlying years, fiscal years 27 through 30. And the next section shows the budget projections for revenues again in blue and expenditures in red. And as planned, expenditures are projected to continue to outpace revenues. So in the final section looks at our fund balance projection for that same time period. The green bars represent our actual and projected fund balances for each year. And then the orange bar shows the minimum required fund balance of 10% for this fund. Again, those trend lines show the annual projected fund balances related to that minimum. And as you can see, we're managing this fund to maintain that minimum fund balance of 10%. So included in this projection is the projected special assessment for Aspen Ridge Elementary. And so that concludes the presentation.
Questions? I'll look at a really small spreadsheet.
Board members, any questions?
No questions. I mean, we see the trend, we see the flip where our expenditures are now greater than our revenue. And so by definition, the math on increasing at 3% a year no longer works with what we expect for the state. And we've talked at length about some of the impacts that different mandates have had and revenue that did and did not cover those things. So I think continuing to stay close to their legislative platform and our legislators will be important. One thing that we haven't spent time in the past talking about that I want us to begin to think about or consider going forward. So while we do have the budgets that are year over year in all of these documents, what we don't have as much visibility to is what's happening inside of it. So when we talk about making investments aligned to our strategic plan, more clarity, like for example, the growth of AVID, which we support. So as we talk about things leaving the system, new things coming into the system, where are we investing in different types of supports? Before we get to the point of approving the budget, I think that's the conversation that we need to have, is how do we have visibility to things that are inside these budgets and what that means from programmatic changes, investing in different programmatic changes, or how do we have more visibility so that we know if we're investing in one area in teaching and learning, what is coming out, what's the trade-off, so that we can be more intentional or be brought along more with that as well. So because we've spent so much time the last couple of years talking about how we are getting more of that consistency,
Right.
how we are looking at the different supports that are more effective and the strategies that are tied to the outcomes. I would like to see more visibility inside of that for those investments.
And we do have that. Dr. Bash, you want to talk about it, like, because people want to go home real briefly of what you're...
Yeah, no, not to dive into tonight.
Okay, not tonight. Okay, we'll see. Okay, go ahead, Kelsey. Another day, another day.
Thank you.
Right, like I'm totally
You're welcome up.
Actually, Brian, can you do the presentation right now?
Yes, exactly.
I'm just kidding. Well, kind of along those lines, I've said it before, and Brian, I really liked how you laid it out, you know, to kind of explain like what was going on, give the lay of the land, and I've said this before, but I mean, I'm really interested in the community ed and supporting you in just being able to ensure that all of our students can access the wonderful, amazing programming that are coming out of that, and like I want to be able to explore like maybe like what you do, like, you know, what other partnerships with the cities, like with the, you know, the Rec on the Go, or like what local foundations, you know, how can we tap into more so we ensure that each and every one of our sites, each and every one of our students has access to these like enrichments, you know, that go beyond the academics, because I just believe that that is just really encompasses a full educational experience. And if we can provide that access to all of our students as much as possible, I mean, we're going to see the impact in like graduation rates and senses of, you know, belonging and all those things. And so I'm really committed and I feel really passionate about that. And I think I don't know if I quite put it in the spreadsheet yet for the work session, but you know, I would like, you know, really like to talk about that. And one other thing is like what you said, I mean, what else we need to be advocating for at the legislature, because I've talked to legislators and I do think, like, I feel like there's just like this disconnect between like what's happening in our districts and like what they're seeing. Because I talk to them and they're like, we've already given you like all this money, and I'm like, I know, but you know, and so yeah, whatever we need to do legislatively to be able to explain it, and probably it's what you're talking, you know, just like the ins and outs of it. That's all. But thank you.
Well, and to Kelsey's point too, we know we've talked about some of this in the past, where do we have an understanding what % of our students are doing something after school, like whether it's like with the partnerships, with community ed,
and
with
summers,
the on-site in summers, like how do summers is huge, So how do we paint the full picture?
We certainly have robust activities programs at our high schools, right? You know, like the theater, band, sports, all, you know, but because those are, to me, those are all a part of the out of school time experience, right? Throughout the grade span. So, yeah, it'd be, you know, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in our school that people don't know about. That is really excellent still, right? That happens in those hours that connect young people who aren't always fully connected to the academic part of the day, that keeps them engaged to maybe increase their
and like,
likelihood.
how do we like keep building that?
Yeah,
you know?
That's awesome.
No.
Yeah, no, my only comment is where our expenditures and our revenues are going, and just the concern for them. Deficit spending is concerning to hear, but I look forward to hearing what adjustments and plans we've got in store.
All right. I don't have any additional questions, so just a huge thank you. Thank you, Kelly, as always, for getting us through these presentations. So that's all we got, right?
I think that's it. I did want to just let the board know that a few of us will be speaking at the Brooklyn Park City Council meeting on November 24th. I'll put that in my update, but I want people to know.
Thank you. All right. Meeting is adjourned at 8:31.